Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Sorry, give me a second. I'm just trying to make all my panelists co-hosts so you guys can turn on your video. Can everyone try their audio? Does it work in their video?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. All right, and now we're just waiting for Dr. Thompson and Manuela.
Can you hear me? This is Dr. Adensi. Great.
Okay, sorry, just Manuela. Okay. Okay. All right, now we're just waiting for Dr. Thompson. Sorry. We're just waiting on Dr. Thompson, and then let's see. Okay, there she is. I'm gonna make her a co-host. All right, we have everyone. Oh. Co-host. Sorry, give me one more second. Attendee. Okay. Perfect. Now we have everyone. All right. All right, perfect. Thank you everybody for joining. My name is Seun Adebagbo. For those who are new, this is the Premed Zoom party. For those who are coming back, you guys know we've been having panels every single Friday and Saturday to address something in the pre-med process. And today we're going to be talking about money and financing your medical education. I think this was a really, really important panel to discuss because, at least for me, when I was picking my schools and kind of applying, I wasn't really thinking about how much school costs. Like, in the back of my mind, I knew, okay, debt, I'm going to have to take out money, but I didn't really understand how much of a serious factor it is in deciding your school. So I wanted to have some panelists talk about how they funded their medical education, how they tackled debt. So I'm just going to have each panelist go ahead and introduce themselves first. You can just say your name, where you're from, your role, and then kind of your relation to the panel. So it'd be debt paid or going to school with full tuition or scholarship. So let's start with Dr.
Which physician?
Dr. Dunsi.
Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Adensi. I finished residency last August in 2019. I am a fresh new OBGYN attending in the Kirkland area, and my role on the panel is my debt is paid.
Thank you. What about you, Dr. Halford?
Hello, everyone. I am Brittany Halford. I am from Flint, Michigan originally and finished residency in 2016. I am an internal medicine physician in Boston, and my debt is paid.
We love to see it. What about you, Dr. Thompson?
Hi, everyone. I think you're the first person to kind of address me as Dr. Thompson. I graduated med school like last week. I will be starting a residency in obstetrics and gynecology out on the West Coast in California. And my role on the panel is I'm a National Health Service Corps scholarship recipient.
Thank you. What about you, Manuela?
Hi, I'm an incoming M1, so I just finished my application cycle. I'm currently residing in Maryland, and I'll be going out west for medical school. And my role is that I was able to negotiate my financial aid to minimize my debt.
Perfect. Last but never least, Addie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Addie. I am from Colorado.
Hey, Addie, we can't hear you anymore. I think the mic might have got blocked.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. My name is Addie, and I'm from Colorado. I've lived here since my family moved here from Ethiopia when I was 4, and I got one merit-based scholarship for all 4 years of medical school, and I'm an incoming M1.
All right. Thank you guys so much. So I'm kind of going to start, I don't want to say at the bottom and work my way up, but I want to start with the incoming MS1s to kind of talk about what your thought process was in applying to medical school regarding finances. Did you think about it from the beginning of applying, or did you start to think about it after you got in? And what skills or what did you do to negotiate your packages, or what do you think is important for students to know to potentially set themselves up to start medical school with a scholarship from the school? Manuel.
I can start. Yeah, so actually, I was thinking about it from day one. My goal wasn't to get into medical school. My goal was to get into medical school and have to pay almost nothing. So I think going into the cycle, I was always intentional about making sure that by the end, I had the best financial aid package possible. And what that meant was that the way I approached my school list, and most importantly, the way I approached like my application was all with the intention of it being excellent, because I wanted to be in a position where I could negotiate myself a scholarship. So what I did, I think, to like really help set me ahead, I got advice from upperclassmen who just told me to try to be the best medical school applicant that I can possibly be, and that it would pay off in the cycle. And they were honestly completely right. I always kind of made sure that I was trying my hardest at school, trying my hardest on the MCAT. And when it came to like crafting my application cycle, trying to stand out as an applicant and trying to kind of show the schools that I would be an asset to whatever your mission or goal was. And during my interviews cycle, my goal was I only ended my interviews once I got into a school and they gave me money. And so if I didn't have like a type of scholarship at the end of my cycle, I didn't cancel any interviews. So once I got into a school, they gave me some merit-based aid. That's when I stopped because I knew I already had something I could negotiate with other schools. So that was just kind of like my thought process.
I think I'm the same way. I was thinking about money pretty early on. I started looking up outside scholarships to apply to. There were a ton that I didn't end up getting, and then there were a few I did. So that was sort of my backup, is just to have outside scholarships and hopefully some aid from the school. And I think that when reaching out to people that were above me and in previous medical school classes or close to graduating, some advice that I got was to really hone in on what your passion is, and that a lot of scholarships will be sort of achievement based. So if you are interested in research, make sure you're getting credit for that research, which I think a lot of undergrads have trouble sort of wrapping their heads around. So if something is taking up your time, that thing is valuable, make sure you have something, a way that you can present it that really just shows what you're passionate about, what's important to you. And when you find a school that you fit into, that's going to be how you present yourself to them, and hopefully those values align. So for me, that was my involvement with pre-medical students and doing several different things that were helping pre-medical students. So that was one big selling point, I think, that made schools really like me. And I started getting scholarship offers from schools. And when I got my first full tuition scholarship offer, I negotiated with other schools even. So I was still in the negotiation process, and other schools, I think some people don't even know you can negotiate scholarship offers, which you can. And there are people from your undergraduate institution that will help you with how to word letters and how to, sort of navigate that process that can sometimes be awkward. So I would definitely say reach out to people, past advisors and people that are older than you that have been through the process, to figure out how to navigate those sometimes intimidating or sometimes awkward conversations. So I was negotiating offers with other schools, and they would either match it or not match it. But at the end of the day, I went with the school that would cost me negative money to attend, because it was the best offer. And I think one thing to understand is you have to find a school that you will be happy at no matter what. And it might not be the highest ranked school that you get into, because that might not be the school that offers you full tuition, but you have to decide for yourself what's more important, being 80 or $1,000, sorry, 80 or $100,000 or more in debt when you graduate, or, being debt free and being able to go wherever you want for residency.
Addie, thank you so much for bringing that up at the tail end. And I think that's something that our attendings and our resident are going to talk about when I call on them. But I think that's something really important to bring up, is this concept of like, which is more important. And that's something I've struggled with in my selection process. And I've talked to my other friends where it's like, there's a school, maybe, like this is where your heart has been set at for all your life, right? Or maybe all of the application cycle. But the reality is that like, they're not giving you what another school is giving you, right? And do you make that decision to go there knowing the price tag? Or do you say, you know what? I am thinking about a 32-year-old me who's going to be happy about, not having debt. So I think you bring up a good point that I'm going to ask our attendings to touch upon. And I think something that's important to think about is, to what extent does rank matter when deciding, is money a factor in paying for school? So I kind of want to go to Dr. Thompson, and I think a lot of students were quite interested in hearing how you became a recipient of the National Health Service Corps scholarship. A lot of people are interested in what you did to make yourself competitive. I too am interested, right? Because it is a very competitive scholarship for students. So I guess kind of an overview of how you found out about it. When in your application, like when in your career did you apply? Did you apply before starting medical school or during medical school? And a bit more of the service obligation, so students really understand the scholarship, the benefits, and what comes with the scholarship.
Sure, I can definitely touch on that. And I think this is like the perfect spot for me to go, because I was in the position of Addie and Manuela, where I was actually in undergrad when I was approached by a medical school, my state school, who kind of told me, I'm going to get real candid here, who basically offered me a full ride if I perform at a certain point for the MCAT. So here comes the MCAT. I'm studying for it. I took it. I did not reach that mark. to secure the full scholarship. So that really had a huge effect on me well, first, I didn't really know I wanted to go into medicine until I was like a sophomore in college. And then I was a first generation college student. No one in my family had ever like done medicine. So it was really me trying to figure out things on my own. And I went to a predominantly white institution. And so there was not a lot of diversity, not a lot of mentors around. So I was kind of navigating things on my own. And so just to kind of highlight what Addie and Manuela are saying, schools will reach out to you, but you, like Manuela was saying, you have to be an excellent candidate. Like she said that she was making herself kind of the best that she could be. She studied really hard for the MCAT and was able to perform well, both of them. I'm so proud of you guys for getting the full rides. It's really awesome. So it's definitely out there. Schools will approach you even before it's time to apply and offer you scholarships and money. If they see that you're a promising student and you're doing well in school, you just have to get those connections. And I was connected to my state's medical school through my advisor. We had a really good relationship with them. So I was able to kind of go to the institution, do research, and then kind of make my face known as a sophomore, junior in college. And then they just kind of gave me the offer then. But it did not end up working out because of my MCAT score. I was off by like maybe a point or two. And I wasn't willing to retake it because I was still able to apply to other medical schools and get interviews. But I wish I was a little bit more wise like these two. Like, don't go to medical school just to go to medical school, because the cost of attendance is increasing and physician salary isn't really keeping up with that. So in hindsight, I think I kind of did what Addie and Manuela did. I was like, I've gotten an offer to go to medical school for free, and that didn't work out. And I'm like, I have to figure out another way to pay for medical school, because I just can't take on all of that debt. It just didn't make sense, especially as an out-of-state student. My institution, I have classmates who are graduating with over $500,000 of student loan debt. And one of my classmates who was out of state, she told me by the end of residency, her loans are going to be at like $800,000. And I was like, how? But apparently that's what it's going to be. So I think her residency is about 5 years and she's already at 500,000. So after I got my, I think I was a junior or a senior, and I was like, I have to figure out a way to get medical school paid for since I don't have this full ride anymore. And like I said, I got into my interest in medicine kind of developed during my sophomore year, junior year. And that's because I kind of got some work with community health, minority communities, and kind of that just opened up my eyes to public health and a lot of the health disparities that minority populations face. So that was the whole reason why I got into medicine, my interest. And I learned about the scholarship, so Googling ways of how can I pay for medical school, or just like different options. And I came across the National Health Service Corps scholarship. And at that time I was working in the emergency room, and one of the doctors that I was really close with her, she told me someone she went to medical school also did the National Service Corps scholarship, and she said that she'd be willing to write me a letter. And so I got accepted to a few medical schools, and then I started to prepare my application. I started in the winter, like January, after getting acceptances, and I submitted the application in spring, like April, and you find out in August, right before you start medical school, if you got the scholarship or not. And so it's a pretty, I don't want to say competitive, because it is like, you have to be a good applicant. I think the big thing with the scholarship is you have to demonstrate that you are committed to working in underserved communities. So I did internships with my public health department. I had a lot of experience with underserved populations that I could write about, and there were tangible experiences that demonstrated my commitment. to underserved communities, and my letter writer. I really think I got the scholarship because of my letter writer. She believed in me so much, and she really wanted me to do well. And I think she just wrote me an amazing letter. And I think that's why I got it, because I was talking with Dr. Halford about the scholarship and how over 2,000 people apply for it each year, and that number is just increasing, but they only offer about 200 scholarships, and it's offered to all professions like MD, DOs, NPs, PAs. So there's a lot of different people trying to get this money and fund their education. So it's really difficult to get just because they don't offer that much money. So I was really lucky. I applied, like I said, right before starting medical school. Right when I got my acceptance, I prepared my application, I submitted it, and I got the notice that I got the scholarship when I started medical school, and I applied for a 4-year. Had I not gotten it at that point, I could apply again as a second year and a third year. You can apply each year that you're in medical school. So that's kind of, did I answer the question?
Yes, thank you. So just 2 clarifying questions. So when you applied upon entering, or as you were going into your first year, did you ask for all 4 years of funding? And like, what is the service obligation now that you're a resident? And how does that look like for you after they've paid?
Right. So I did apply for all 4 years, and I always get the question. It is a very serious commitment to make. You're signing a contract with the government, and if you don't follow through with the contract, then you owe like a crazy amount of money back. It was like millions of dollars, something like that, back to the government. So you have to really be sure that you want to work with underserved communities. You want to do primary care, and I already knew that about myself, so I had no problem committing to 4 years, and that's what I wanted. And so I did 4 years, and they pay all of my tuition, all of my fees, and I get a monthly stipend, $1,200. So that really helped with living expenses. And now that I can apply, now that I'm done with medical school, like you can apply anywhere that you want for residency. So I applied all over, and I'm doing OB-GYN. And then after that, we'll see how it goes. I will apply with my kind of classmates for jobs at federally qualified health centers that meet a certain criteria. And it's like a whole complicated thing, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we're going to come back to you as well as our incoming MS1s. So I want to talk to our attendings, the ones who know the real tea about paying off the debt and how to tackle that. So I know Dr. Dunsi has some slides, but some questions I want to throw out there for either Dr. Halford or Dr. Dunsi, both actually, to talk about is one, in terms of, I think I'm rather interested to know what it feels like and what it looks like to have the debt upon graduating, right? Like, what are those realities of like paying it off while in residency? How feasible, how realistic is it? And how fast can one pay off? Of course, how much you owe determines, how fast you can pay it off. But I'm kind of curious to just hear from your experiences of like how you tackled the debt upon graduation, or like when you started really seriously tackling the debt. And then something else I know Dr. Halford and I talked about personally is like for the starting a family, like if you have children and then getting married, these big life events that happen that cost a lot of money. How can you have both, or how can you have both while still dealing with the debt? And then also talking about school selection, rank, and cost, and like what your opinions are on them, and how important they are towards someone who maybe knows they want to match into like a top residency program, or they want to go into competitive specialty.
Okay, I guess I'll start. So first I want to say kudos to you ladies. Like, I am just in awe of your drive and excellence, and just the overall astute cleverness that you guys have at this age in the game. Because I can say personally that when I was applying to medical schools, I wasn't thinking or about negotiating, and I'm not sure if you all have read this, but there's a book titled Women Don't Ask. Like, we just don't do a good job at negotiating. And in fact, my first time negotiating was when I transitioned from my first job at Emory to my job at Boston. So I'm very impressed. So let's see, I think that the debt hit me right after I finished medical school. So we have like this exit meeting with our financial advisor at Northwestern. That's where I went for medical school. And she just kind of painted a picture of, this is the amount of debt that you're going to have. If you want to get into the public service loan forgiveness, then this is what you have to do as far as consolidating your loans and which loans qualify. So I had that checklist, and I was pretty diligent right after medical school just to make sure that my loans were aligned with the public service loan forgiveness, because that was my initial plan. And then after that, I applied for an income-driven repayment plan, because in residency, you have many expenses. You're working a lot, but you're really not being paid that much. And so in budgeting for residency, I try to, and I continue to do this, is to prioritize things that give me joy. So like, for example, me eating out every day, that does not give me joy. Like, I can eat the same meal or cook a meal or shop at Aldi's, and I will be perfectly fine with that. So I made sure that I prioritize my expenses so that I could have the most joy in residency and budget out that money, as well as have enough money to pay for my student loans. So when I'm applying for the income-driven repayment plan, then that estimates your loan cost based upon your current income. And I paid that, which was like the minimum amount that I needed to pay, and anything at the end of the month extra, I just added that to it. And so I wasn't extremely aggressive during residency, because I also was married. I got married in residency, and I helped to fund our wedding. So I wasn't extremely aggressive, but I didn't choose the options to defer or go for forbearance that some of my other colleagues did, because I thought that it was important for me to first start, if I wanted for the public service loan forgiveness, to start that time clock right then, because those are valuable years that I would otherwise miss. And also just to start to tackle that debt. I personally just hate to see like the compounding interest. So that was huge for me just to get that start. Let's see, as far as budgeting for life and, you know, while in residency and while tackling debt, again, I think it's just prioritizing what is most important. So I knew that we wanted to get married, and this was the type of wedding that I wanted to have. So I made that a priority of something that was going to bring me like lasting joy, and that I budgeted appropriately for that. So I took in all the expenses that I needed to pay, as well as figuring out other ways that I could either cut costs or increase my income. As a first-year resident, even a second-year resident, you can't really start moonlighting, but during our third years, at least in internal medicine at WashU, we were able to moonlight. So I did pick up some moonlighting shifts to bring in extra income so that I could fund, you know, life and also my debt. And then as far as figuring out which school to go to based upon debt, I think it is important that you take your debt into consideration, because as a medical student, you're not only the school that you go to, right? You are much more than that. You have this wealth of experience that has made you unique, as well as other training in your medical school and how well you perform on your exams, as well as what other extracurriculars you do while in medical school. So you are a complete package, and that medical school name is just one part of your package, but really I don't think it makes that large of a difference. I have been on the interviewing committee for both Emory and Beth Israel Deaconess, where I am currently and attending. And I've seen students who come from Harvard, as well as students who come from other institutions that I was not as well acquainted with. And they were still interviewing. at a Harvard affiliated hospital. So, you know, they are a complete package. And I would just, you know, say to you guys too, that you are a complete package. You're more than your school. And that debt, you're going to have to pay it off. And that debt, you know, depending on where you fall, some people say, okay, well, I'll just wait for 20 plus years and allow the government to, you know, repay that plan or repay that debt, or I'll do the public service loan forgiveness where it might be 10 years. But for me, looking at the payoff rate or percentage for the public service loan forgiveness, it's about 1%. So while all of that debt was accumulating, and compounding, if the government chooses that they're not going to pay that off, I'm still responsible, and I just could not take that liability. So that's why I really started to attack the debt after I finished my residency. But I think that it is important that you make the decision based upon what you determine to be most valuable. But for me, in that equation definitely was debt, because that is something that you could potentially be accountable for if the government does not pay it off in whatever fashion.
Thank you so much. You bring up some really important points. And something I believe I wanted to ask, and this could also, Dr. Odunsi could also answer this as well, is the counseling you have at the end of medical school, how helpful is it? Is it just kind of like, all right, here's your debt, see you later? Or is it actually, because when I've talked to financial aid, you know, people, they say, don't worry, like, we're going to really sit you down and tell you all your options. And I really want to know, like, is it truly helpful, or is it still like you have to figure it out on your own, how to tackle this and what to do with your debt?
So for my experience at Northwestern, I can say Our Lady was actually pretty good. I remember her name, Cynthia Gonzalez, and I met with her multiple times because, you know, I think maybe in medical school, I started listening to Planet Money on NPR. So I was learning about like my income to debt utilization ratio and all of these different things. And so she helped me because I sat down and I met with her kind of at each year, or maybe even biannually, to understand how much money I needed. Okay, well, I want to give back this amount of money because I don't need all the money that they are offering me. And she helped me to know what steps I needed to do in order to pay off my debt. So to start that income-based repayment, as well as to align myself for the public service loan forgiveness. Now, all the other details of like which driven repayment plan is most appropriate and the details of that, no, she wasn't able to help with that. But I think that she did align me well so that I at least had a solid foundation and footing in order to start to pay off my debt.
Thank you. Dr. Odunsi?
There are a lot of questions that were asked, so I'm going to take my time in answering them. But thank you so much for having me here. And I'm, again, just like Dr. Halford, in awe of how aggressive these ladies are, because I definitely wasn't. And I did want to bring a different perspective, because some of us, we do come from privileged backgrounds in terms of our financial freedom. My aggressiveness actually came in December 2017. So I'm going to put up some slides just because it keeps me organized. So you guys can take a look. I hope you can see this. All right, so just a little bit of the goals that I want just for my part, and I will address those questions that have been asked, Seun. So just some background, some did you know facts, and then some Dave Ramsey baby steps, and then some takeaway messages. So the first is that I am a first-generation immigrant. My family came over from Nigeria. I was born in Nigeria, and then we moved to England, and then we moved to the States. And my dad, he is a physician. He did residency the second time in the United States. And my mom, her background, she's a CPA, now health administrator. I have two younger sisters. We all went through college debt-free, and people are like, oh, wow, how did you do that? But my parents, they lived way below their means, and they had consistency. So I do want to present this background of, if you get this money thing, you're going to change your whole family tree. You're going to change your outcome. So I really want that to be the message, that don't get stuck in your mind like it's this debt, this overwhelming thing. You can do anything that you put your mind to and you focus on. So that's the theme. They were able to pay off their home in under 10 years, and they came from Nigeria. They had no money. And the residency salary at that time was like poverty back when my dad trained. I got married straight out of college. I was 21, and my husband handled the finances and all the tax stuff. I was just like, is there enough money? Cool. I'm gonna go shopping all the time. And it wasn't until I overdrew my account and paid a $30 penalty that I was like, oh shoot, I don't know what I'm doing. But then I kept on, I didn't know anything about money, and we were living paycheck to paycheck. He was working while I was in medical school. And even though I got college paid for by my parents and my in-laws helped pay for my master's in public health, I still was just like being very naive and a kid with my money. And I'm very impressed by these ladies because I was not managing money well. My husband was taking care of everything. And I think that's something that women do. And it's time for us to actually be financially literate with our money and not depend on having a man. And I'll go into depth on that. You should know where your money is going and what it's doing and make it work for you. So we bought a house because that's the thing married people do with all this debt. He had his student loans. I took out a year of student loans against my parents' advice. I was like, we're gonna be independent. We're gonna pay for everything with this debt, which is silly. Then in June of 2015, when I was at the last week of my residency, my husband passed away suddenly. 1 hour he was there, 1 hour he was gone. And in that moment, my life crashed and I knew nothing about money. So on top of grief, I have this debt piling up. I became a landlord. I couldn't manage the home, so I got a property manager. I stopped using credit cards because there was no point. So I haven't had a credit card since 2015. So all these life changes are happening. I'm grieving. And then December 2017, I got fed up of being financially illiterate. And I needed a game plan because I was over residency. I needed to create a budget. I needed to pay off all this debt. And I needed to save enough money so I could take a break after residency because I was tired. And I needed to have at least 3 to 6 months off after I was done. And it was December 2017 that I found the Dave Ramsey show and I followed his plan. And I won't share exactly how much debt I had, but I just want to emphasize that if you are intense and focused on one thing, you can do it. So all the medical debt, all the leftover debt from medical school I paid off. And it wasn't that much, it was just that 1 year of medical school. And I went to Meharry Medical College. In picking my medical school, I had the choice between Meharry and a school in Michigan that was gonna charge double the cost with a more name brand. When I am mentoring people, if you give me a list, I'm gonna ask you which one's the cheapest. And that's it. That's where I want you to go. And my mentees know this. I have a mentorship squad, and that's how I advise them, because people think, oh, it's the name that's gonna get you in the door. No, it's your bedside manner, it's your knowledge. Are you a good physician? The name brand doesn't play much of a role until you are saving a patient's life. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Did you know there is a student loan crisis? The total student loan debt is $1.56 trillion, and there are 44.7 million borrowers with student loan debt, and the average student loan debt is $32,000. Now, yes, be scared, because that's what's going to make you pay this off. I do want you to listen to the Borrowed Future podcast. That will get your life, because they will tell the truth. And I do want you to have a little bit of anxiety, because when my husband passed away, I was like, okay, I know nothing about taxes. I don't even know like what forms I need. So that's the first thing. Listen to that podcast. Did you know that there was a recent study in 2017 that surveyed 10,000 millionaires, and physicians were not in the top 5 professions likely to become millionaires? And that is one of my goals. I want to be a multimillionaire. And there are common traits and behaviors that they shared. They take personal responsibility, they practice intentionality, they're goal-oriented, they're hardworking, and they're consistent. Those are things that my parents instilled in me and that I've been working on since December 2017. 59% of Americans do not have the savings to handle a $1,000 emergency, such as a medical bill or a car repair. So I've gotten an ultrasound before without insurance, and that was expensive. So I'm just thinking of all the Americans, like if there's a car repair that needs to be made and it's $1,000, 60% of people can't actually afford that. They don't have the savings for that. So let me walk through the baby steps very quickly, and I'm going to answer those questions that you had shown. The first piece of advice I would give you is to start with that $1,000 starter emergency fund, so that when life happens, which it will, you're prepared. And also, you need to create a monthly budget. I can't emphasize this enough. You need to tell your money where to go, and you need to see where you can tighten it up, because there are so many things that I thought I was in control of, but I was eating out so much, like going to Wendy's almost every day and eating out because I was grieving. So just create a budget, and there's the Every Dollar app. I put the name, write this down, and there's an option to link that to your bank account. And the Dave Ramsey site has everything that you need, directions. I know we're type A people, there's a plan there. And you can also automate your bills. Okay, things that are essential: food, housing, lights and water, transportation, and clothes. Those are the things you handle first. Everything else, so when I was gazelle intense, which I'm going to talk about next with baby step 2, okay, there's a wedding, I'm not going. There's a vacation I could take, I'm not going. I was so focused and made a plan. I'm going to save $12,000 of my residency income towards this debt. And that was the first time that I was able to accomplish a goal like that. I've never saved more than like $100. So when you put your mind to something, you can do it. The second is to pay off all your debt, list them smallest to largest, and then you pay off the smallest, go to the largest. Stop all investing. There's no point. You have debt, pay it off. The investing is not going to cover that debt because the interest is just going to keep accruing. Once you're done with that debt, then boom, you can get into it. Now, in terms of student loans, I want you to use a student loan payoff calculator and also read Anthony O'Neill's book, Destroy Your Student Loan Debt. I'm not an expert because I only had that 1 year of student loan to pay off, but that book, and Anthony O'Neill, he's an expert, read that book. Third baby step is to save 3 to 6 months of expenses in a fully funded emergency fund. So all that cash that you've been paying off towards the debt, pile it up. That was when I was saving to take that time off after residency. And this protects you from those bigger emergencies without going back into debt. And for those who have a family, this is extremely important because you don't know if your partner is going to get laid off at what time, if your spouse, like me, is going to pass away suddenly. So I have a very different view on life now. Like, I want to be prepared, and I don't want to rely on somebody else to take care of me. Granted, now I'm remarried, but my husband knows I'm on it when it comes to the money. Okay, baby step 4. This is where you talk about investing, and you invest 15% of your household income into retirement. Now, when I was finishing up medical school, February, they gave us a lecture, and they're basically like, yeah, meet with the financial advisor. Okay, I met, but I didn't know anything they were talking about. I met with them. So it wasn't until this year that I met with SmartVestor Pro through Dave Ramsey's website, and I was blown away because you need somebody who's going to be able to explain things to you. I didn't understand anything. I would take my taxes to H&R Block, and that was it. But you start with your company's 401k. If you don't have that, you're able to invest the rest in a Roth IRA. If you don't know any of this terminology, you need to have somebody who's able to teach you and explain things to you. And if you're married, you need to create one for yourself and one for your spouse. And then baby step 5, 6, and 7, if you have children, to change your family tree, the biggest gift you can give your children is to help them get through college without without a single piece of debt. So start putting money into their 529, which is a college savings fund, or an ESA, which is an education savings account. And then you can pay off your home early, you can build wealth and give. I think a lot of us have this picture of what life is supposed to be. You get married, you have the kids, you buy the home, but let's be smart about it. If you don't have the money, a house is not going to be a blessing to you. It's going to be a curse. And I've been a landlord in debt. Oh, the roof needs to be replaced. Of course it does. And you're in residency. And where are you going to have that money? So if the automatic reaction is to just pay with credit cards, then there's not really going to be a change, and we're going to keep digging ourselves into these holes. And I do strongly believe that we can be multimillionaires if we're smart with our money. So some of the takeaways that I have, and I know this is coming off as a presentation, as a lecture, but I'm so passionate about this and how much it's changed my life. I have to get these words to you guys. It is not a goal that's not able to be accomplished. So your choice in your cost of college and medical school has a huge impact in setting yourself up for financial success. You do not need debt to get a good education. Choosing to build wealth is more important than creating the illusion of wealth. So that's buying the fancy cars, buying the fancy house, and you have all this debt. It just doesn't make sense. With the correct mindset, meaning you have control over your destiny, you can become a millionaire and change your family tree. And it doesn't matter what your mom did, your dad did, your auntie did, you can get this too. You have the power to change your family tree, and thank you. I appreciate your time, everybody.
I'm sorry, can I just jump in to deviate for one bit? So one of the things that I did that has not been brought up is I refinanced my loans. And refinancing your loans is something that is not for everyone. But basically when you refinance your loans, you are refinancing with a bank. So my loans were initially, most of my loans were federal loans, okay? And so then I refinanced them with a private bank. Now, when I refinanced my loans, it took me from a 6.8% interest rate to a 3.25% interest rate. But that was not based on an income-driven repayment plan. So my payments for my student loans increased significantly, nor would I be able to put them on forbearance or ask for deferment in the case that I had some type of change in my income. So those are some of the differences between refinancing and keeping your loans in a federal plan. So like now, for example, we refinanced my husband's loans and he's a fellow, but we don't get any of this benefit now that we have an economic downturn. So we're still paying our monthly payments. Thankfully, we haven't had any changes to our income, but it has allowed us to save money on interest because it's brought our interest rate down to a 2.4%. So that is just an option that I wanted to present that people can consider if you do have student loan debt. And I would not consider refinancing your loans until you are an attending. You can think about it during residency, but just because you're not earning as much during residency, it may be a little bit tight for you to do. It is possible, but it may be tight for you to do. But it is an option that can help to decrease the amount of compounding interest over time.
Thank you. And Dr. Halford, you mentioned moonlighting, and I'm not sure all our attendees know what that is. Can you talk a bit more about moonlighting, what it is, and why you brought it up in regards to tackling debt?
Okay, yes. So money is an equation, right? You make money, you have your expenses, and then you have whatever is left over. So if you have this amount of debt that's in that expense pile and you want to pay that off quickly, then you have to have more money. You have to bring in more money. And so moonlighting is something that you can do. For me, I was in my third year of residency where basically I just picked up extra shifts at our hospital. So I still worked as a resident as a full-time, and then I picked up additional shifts at that hospital to earn extra money. And that money was at a higher rate. So I would get paid, for example, you might get paid $100 or $200 per patient that you see. or, $100 per hour. And this is something that you can do oftentimes in your senior year of your residency. Some hospitals allow you to do it during your junior year, but my husband does a lot of moonlighting now in his fellowship, and he actually is contracted with 4 or 5 different hospitals. So he is a fellow at Boston Children's, and then he works at 4 or 5 different hospitals a couple of days out of the month, where he makes a larger amount of money for that weekend. And so it is an additional income that he's bringing into that money equation so that he can pay off more of his expenses more quickly. And so I had $138,000 in debt. And all of my debt was my debt. And so, I agree with Dr. Ondunsi, like I am setting this up differently for my daughter so that our daughter, my husband and our daughter, so that she doesn't have to have as much student loan debt. But that was all my debt that I had to pay off and work to pay that off. And so, again, just thinking about that money equation is how much money are you bringing in? What are your expenses? And that's what you have left over. And so for me, the moonlighting was a way that I could increase the money that I was bringing in so that I could pay off that debt expense. Another way is to just decrease your other expenses. So like she mentioned, weddings were off, she had gazelle intensity. And so for me, I started unplugging things in my apartment, and my husband's like, why is the microwave unplugged? Because that light is draining our coins that I'm going to put towards my student loans. So, it is all math, and you really just have to make the numbers work for you. And so that was how I was able to make it work for me to pay off my student loan debt.
Okay, I have one more question for Dr. Halford and Odunsi, and then some students have been submitting questions to the Q&A, so I'm kind of going to read out some questions to kind of for up in the air for people to answer, whether it's targeted at one person or anyone could answer. So last thing, I think what I'm hearing from both of you is you guys both tackled your own debt. And I guess when you become married, depending on who you ask, finances kind of become combined. So I guess I'm kind of curious, for those who want to start a family, right, or get married, do you suggest like tackling your own debt before choosing to start a family, before choosing to get married, or do you work together with your partner to pay off your debt and then their debt, or should you just take your own responsibility for your own debt?
Start. Until you're married, that is your debt and that is your spouse's debt. When you get married, this is what I believe, you come together, and even though you might have separate accounts or whatever, you're still a collective group. That's why you got married, you're partners. So now it's our debt. And the thing is, I think people get nervous about sharing their debt, but now I'm fine with it, but that's something that you do in pre-marriage counseling, where you talk about your debt, you talk about like how many kids do you want, you talk about those deep things, and those all shed light into, okay, this is how the relationship is going to be. So I think being very transparent about income, debt, how you're going to tackle it, those can be conversations that you have before you get married. And then when you get married, it's like you're a force to be reckoned with, and you have the 2 incomes and you're making that money work. So that's my current status with my husband. We're making that money work. So definitely talk with your partner before you get married, but your debt is your debt before you get married.
Yeah, so I agree. So when my husband and I started dating, we sat down, and I remember this was like early on in our relationship. And I'm like, okay, what's your credit score? And he's like, I'm like, do you have a credit card? He's like, no, I just pay everything outright cash. And I'm like, well, how are you working to build your credit? And so we pulled up and we went to, I think it's the annualcreditreport.com, where you could get one free credit report annually. And we filled it out and we got our credit scores. And we actually had this discussion of, okay, how are we going to work together to build our credit? In addition to that, we discussed how much student loan debt we were working with. And at that time, we were both medical students. But at the end, you know, we continue to have these discussions. And I agree, this is something that you talk about in premarital counseling, but I had this discussion before we were even engaged, like right from the beginning, because I wanted to know if this was a man that I was going to be dating, then I needed to know what financial situation I would be in, because for me, that was very important. How we decide to do our finances was we are helping each other with our debt. So one of the things as a resident, if you want to refinance, because your income is pretty low and your debt is probably very large, you may actually need a co-signer of sorts. So that co-signer could be your spouse, it could be a parent, or maybe you do have with moonlighting enough income so that you don't actually require a co-signer. But we were able to figure things out to make it work for us. And I think that it's very individual. It's going to be based upon each person's relationship. But I do agree with Dr. Ondunsi that this is a discussion that you need to have before you actually get married. And we work together to make sure that our numbers work, because we are one unit, and overall we're on the same team.
Thank you. Now I'm just gonna, because I respect your time, we're gonna spend about maybe 5 to 7 minutes just going through some of the Q&A. In the first, a lot of questions for Addie and Manuela about how do you go about negotiating scholarship offers. Some people are afraid of like, how do you approach a school and say like, hey, can I have more money? So I'd love to hear you guys, how you guys navigated that, and any advice you have for students who don't know how to start that conversation of negotiation.
Yeah, I can start. I know it's a really awkward conversation to have, and I think this was Dr. Odensi who mentioned that sometimes as women, sometimes as minorities, who knows, we feel uncomfortable asking for more. And I think it's really important to get into the habit, know other people are doing it, and know that, like Manuela said, if you have worked this hard to make yourself a competitive candidate, then the school wants you just as much as you want them. If they accepted you into their medical school class, they chose you out of 10,000 other applicants. They want you. So I would just say it's a hard conversation, but reach out to people for help. So one thing that your undergraduate institution would be available for is using your pre-health advisors to help you draft things like emails and how to draft the letters where you do negotiate scholarships. So there's a certain etiquette to do it. And if you don't know what it is, then ask. And it's the same if you're on a wait list and you want to write a letter of continued interest. Just ask them, and they do this all the time. It's their job. So they are more than happy to help you. If you're graduated already, like I was, it's not weird to go back and ask them for help with these. That's what they do all the time. So my advice is to just ask. You don't want to just go about it and maybe miss some etiquette points. You don't want to look bad in front of a school where you're trying to negotiate a scholarship. So just getting advice would be my main point of advice for that. There are people out there that can help you and who do it often.
I second that. I actually got help from one of my friends who's a finance major, and they negotiate all the time. So she sat me down and helped me write my negotiation letter. But I think as for the psychology of it, I think just remember that at the end of the day, if you're at the point of negotiating, you are already in. The worst thing they can do is say no. I think there's a lot of fear that you're going to like lose your acceptance if you negotiate. No, you're just trying to get yourself the best package that you can get, and you're trying to put yourself on the right path. And I think when writing that letter, you can also be completely honest. I think in my letters, I would say what I loved about the school, and I would say the things about the schools that were compelling for me to go there. But then I'd be honest at the end, and I'd say that I am 21. I don't want to go into this much debt. I don't, if there's an option for me to not do it, I would like to not do it. I understand that what I'm asking for is a lot, and I understand that you may not be able to do it, but I just want to let you know where I stand. And I think just being honest with the schools about where you are, and tell them what you like about the school, tell them that they made an impression on you. But at the end of the day, just do it. If you are in a position where you feel like you could ask for money, I don't think it hurts to ask, because you'd be surprised what would happen. I think if I didn't negotiate, I wouldn't have the financial package that I do right now. Yes, I say go forward, ask for help. If you know someone who's in business, they know a lot about asking for money. So I would say hit them up too.
Okay. Another question I got was for Dr. Thompson regarding the scholarship. So we know that tuition is covered and that there's a stipend. And I think there was a question regarding, does a stipend actually cover your living expenses? And may you have to borrow additional money to help, or was the budget that the scholarship offered enough?
That's a great question. I would say it depends on where you are living. Cost of living is different at different parts of the country. And I think you can kind of negotiate maybe for an increase in stipend if you do live like in a more expensive, or if you're attending medical school in a more expensive area like New York or LA. For me, I think I did good in securing a scholarship. I think my downfall was I, like Dr. Odensi, I like to spend, I like to shop. So I did take out extra loans for each semester, but I didn't really need it. So I think the loan, I would say the $1,200 a month, it was able to cover housing, food, all the necessities. I could get covered with the 1,200, but if I wanted to like go on vacation, like I went to Paris with my classmates during second year of medical school, because like Dr. Helfer said, this is a very challenging time in your life. You are studying a lot and you need to enjoy life as well. So I did take out additional loans for that. But it would only be like a couple thousand a semester, nothing crazy, just enough I think the National Health Service Corps was able to cover my necessities, and I would take out a couple extra thousand to do like activities and just to kind of stay happy and have a well-rounded life while in med school. I think that scholarship afforded me that opportunity.
Thank you. Another question I got, and I'm not sure if our attendings are comfortable answering this, but a couple questions were like, how long did it take you to actually pay off your debt?
I'm fine with answering it. So I had $138,000 in debt when I finished residency. I paid it off in 3.5 years. And that was also while I maxed out my 401k, and I also had additional investments. So yeah, so that's what I did.
Thank you.
I can't remember the exact time, but it was from 2015 until maybe 2018, 19, something there.
Yes. So thank you. Another question I'm seeing here is, and this might be more towards my rising MS1s, how do you find scholarships for medical school? At least I can firsthand say a girl's been searching, and it's quite hard to find funding for graduate school in general, but they're out there. So do you guys have any advice of how to look?
The main thing that I did, I've been pretty money conscious all through college. I was in a similar position that I am now, starting college, having to choose between sort of like the dream school scenario and saving money. So thankfully, because of that, I've been conscious about saving money going into medical school. So what I do is when I hear about a good scholarship, and I look it up and I'm eligible, I keep an Excel document on my computer. So I put in the year that I'll be eligible, what the scholarship is, and like the link to their website. So that's because I noticed that as an undergrad, I was hearing about, oh, this sounds like a cool fellowship opportunity. This sounds like a cool scholarship opportunity, but I'm not eligible yet, or I'll probably need it in a year or two. So what happened is when I was at the point of applying to medical school, I went through that Excel doc and I looked at all the ones that I was eligible for. I applied to those and I did additional Google searches. And I do agree that it is very difficult to find them just through Google searching. I had the same difficulty when I was just Google searching. So I reached out to, there's something at my institution called the Office of Top Scholarships. So there is an office there that sort of keeps track of all of the scholarships that our people at our school tend to apply for and tend to get. So that was another resource that I found very helpful.
Yeah, I was going to add, I didn't do a lot of searching for outside scholarships, but reaching out to your undergraduate college and seeing if they know of any graduate scholarships, because I know my institution does the same thing. And also, I would say reaching out to current medical students, if you're a rising M1, asking them if they know of any scholarships that they've gotten or people they know who've gotten scholarship, and asking the school's financial aid office if they know of any scholarships you can apply to. You have a social network, tap into it, so you can get a lot of information that way. And I think someone asked me about being an international student. So I'm not an international student. I am an immigrant, but by the time I applied to medical school, I was already a US citizen.
Another question I got that I think Dr. Halford and Dr. Dunsi can talk more towards is, some students are kind of curious, like what would an average residency salary be like? Because I know you guys mentioned that like you're not really making much during that time. So what's an idea of how much students expect to make? I know it depends on like your specialty and a lot of other factors, but perhaps a range just to help the attendees.
Sure. It is less than minimum wage. But it's probably ranging. So each year they add a little bit, and the range, depending on your location, is probably from 50 to 60,000, and that goes up as you progress through residency. So it's not a lot at all. And then they take out taxes, which could be about $10,000-$12,000. So it's not a lot at all. And I think, sorry, excuse me.
Sorry.
I think somebody talked about side hustles as I was scrolling through. Yeah, I think it depends on what you do, but there's certainly ways to market your talents and your crafts. I have a mentee, she does photography on the side and she's in medical school. So if you can capitalize on your talents, then do so. And that might bring in another like $10,000.
Yeah, so I think the last time I looked, it was $61,000, but again, there's a range, so that's on average. So, you know, you don't make that much money, right? You do work a lot of hours and you are very tired, but you can still make it work for you. And, you know, that's why I really emphasize the joy budgeting, because you can't do everything, but you just want to make sure that you can optimize and prioritize what brings you the most joy so that you can still have fulfillment while you're tired and working like a slave, and still pay off your expenses. So if anybody is interested in the joy budget, I do have like something that I've created for myself and how I weigh like which expenses actually are going to bring me joy and the cost and whether it's like a good investment or not. So feel free to DM me and I'll send that over to you, because I don't have like a way to just so that you can go and to get it and access it.
Okay, thank you. I'm just scrolling through to see. Somebody asked, do you recommend having a financial advisor to tackle debt, or is this something you can do on your own?
It's pretty straightforward based on my PowerPoint. You list all your debt, smallest to largest, and then you tackle it. You don't really need somebody else outside of yourself to tell yourself to pay something. It's an internal discipline that you have. Your financial advisor isn't going to make the payment. So it's something that you can definitely do by yourself. But if you move towards like investing and you don't understand anything, then sure, a financial advisor is fine. But remember, financial advisors cost money, and I didn't have any money. So it's not until this year that I paid for one.
So I agree. You can do it on your own. You can even invest on your own and just do index funds and I do have a financial advisor, but when I go to him, I have my own knowledge. And sometimes we disagree, actually. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not actually going to get a whole life insurance policy. We're going to get term life insurance policies and things of that nature, because we're not paying him, but he does get a commission on some of the things that he sells us, the products that he sells us. So it is important that you have your own working knowledge, and, you know, to reemphasize Dr. Odonsi's, to be financially literate. And then also speaking to your side hustles, I actually babysat when I was in medical school. And so I went to medical school at Northwestern in Streeterville, and a lot of people there are rich. And so someone paid me $20 an hour to play with their son. So I think that there are ways that you can do it. You, of course, want to make sure it's like a gig type of thing, that when you have a downtime in medical school and you finish your studies that you can pick up, and it's not something that you have to commit yourself to. But there are other ways that you can do a side hustle as long as you have gotten your studies done.
I did hair, and I was a tutor during medical school.
Thank you. Another question I got is regarding the dual degree, the MPH. So people want to know, did you get that during medical school? Did you take out loans for that? And did that factor into choosing what school to go to because you knew you wanted to get an MPH?
I think 2 of us have an MPH. I'll let Dr. Hofford answer.
So yes, I got mine while in medical school. It was a little bit more, but it wasn't significant. So that really didn't factor into my decision of getting an MPH. And what I just realized is that as an individual provider, I can change the lives of many, but population health is very important. And like Dr. Thompson, I also had a desire to serve the underserved, and that really helped to pair my learning on an individual basis and a population basis so that I could advocate for my patients in different ways. So at Northwestern, they had a combined program. I did it all within 4 years. I did not have to take any additional time.
Okay, so as we come to a close, I'm going to ask my panelists to drop your Instagram names to the attendees so they can follow you, continue the conversations in your DMs. But lastly, I want to ask, what is, for each and every panelist, what is your parting for so it's going to be like maybe a 2-part, 3-part question. So pre-meds, right? Because the entire part of the journey is expensive. Even applying to medical school, taking the MCAT, everything costs, literally it's a money-making business. So what is your advice for students who are literally at the beginning of it? And what are some things they can do to set themselves up for success throughout the process? For some of us who are entering medical school and will be incurring some kind of debt, what are some things we should think about and do in medical school? And then for our med students who are on here, what are things that they need to do as they head towards graduation to prepare themselves for tackling the debt?
I think I can only speak for the pre-meds, but I think the one piece of advice that I will say is, if you're early on in your pre-med journey, or if you're in the middle or near the end, I think remember that you're not just trying to get into med school, you're trying to give yourself options. So knowing that, the most powerful thing is having a choice, and having a choice in where you get to go and the type of lifestyle you get to have. So when you're working and thinking about getting into medical school and kind of thinking about your grades, your MCAT score, your personal statement, do your very best. You don't need a 528, you don't need a 4.0, but remember that when you're working hard, you're really just trying to give your future self the best options possible. And I think if you work with that mindset, you will be surprised by what happens at the end of your cycle. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I can only speak for my experience as a pre-med, and now I haven't even started medical school, but one thing I like to do is always just be aware of finances. Dr. Odunsi mentioned listening to Dave Ramsey, and I think having sort of an outlet that allows you to be more financially literate than you were before is great. I personally listen to the White Coat Investor podcast just on my commute to work, and I try to always just be aware of spending habits, because I think everyone has an idea that once you're a doctor, you're going to be making a ton of money, and if that's your goal, then that's great, but that's not necessarily my goal. I want to be able to do what I want to do. I don't want to be burdened by debt and have to choose a specialty that makes more money, or have that affect my goals, my personal goals myself. So I think just being conscious and just attending this webinar means that everyone here is conscious about money as well. So I think everyone who's attended is already in a good spot.
I think I'll add to what you guys said. First off, it's really important to start thinking about this early, like everyone here is doing. I'm currently reading The White Coat Investor. I have it here. And my classmate really recommended the Financial Boot Camp. It's a 12-step guide, and she said this really changed her life. So I'm currently making my way through these. I wish I started earlier. So definitely get your hands on these if you can. And I would say, kind of like Addie and Manuel, I was conscious of money. Early on, I knew I wanted to get medical school paid for and tried to figure out the best way to do that in my circumstance. And I would also add, during medical school, at least at my school, we had electives, and one elective was like financial literacy in medicine. It was a kind of a money in medicine, like kind of this panel, but for a whole month. So we had kind of physicians come in, private practice, National Health Service Corps physicians, service physicians, just different physicians, and they came in and they talked about their practice style and reimbursement, things like that. We also had financial investors come in and talk to us, and we learned about Roth IRAs and just kind of ways to maximize our income and decrease our debt. So if your school offers any kind of financial literacy class, elective, I would definitely recommend it.
Let's see. So 3 points that I would make. The first is that you are in control of your life and you're responsible for your life. You're responsible for your decisions. So you can decide today, right now, that you're going to take control of your finances. And as hard as it is, you guys work hard. You're pre-meds, you're in medical school. You are able to be disciplined if you're able to study for exams. So apply that same focus and energy to your finances, and I think you'll do well. The second point is to find a mentor. I have the mentorship squad, but I have so many mentors. I have financial mentors, not only my parents, but people who are where I want to be. So I don't necessarily talk to people who are in debt, and it's not in a condescending way. It's that I have goals and I want to get to this level. So I look at people who are at this level and I do what they do. And it's not rocket science. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I get mentors who are, well, I don't know their net worth, but I want to get to a certain place financially, and I want to do it in a smart way. The third thing is to have accountability. So I do have an accountability group for my finances, and we're all on different levels. One of them is my sister, and she is definitely more advanced than I am in terms of financial literacy. So get comfortable with talking about finances and what you know, what you don't know, run ideas by people. I get excited to talk about this with people. So find an accountability group, get a mentor, and make sure that you are in control and responsible for your own decisions. So those are the 3 things I would say.
So I would say that you can't have everything, but while you're paying off debt, it doesn't have to be miserable. Okay. Because I think a lot of people look at like budgeting and things of that nature, that it is miserable. Oh, I can't have this. It's like so restrictive. And so that's really why I focus on what brings me the most joy, not the happiness like me eating that Snickers and then I'm happy for like 30 seconds and then I want something else. Like what is really going to bring you the most joy, and making sure you can budget around those things and being realistic. Make a plan, work the plan, reevaluate the plan, because life changes. So, you know, I had a plan in residency, we got married, or we wanted to get married, so I had to readjust some of the finances. Then we had a baby, we still have to readjust the finance. So the plan that you make on day 1 is not going to be the same plan that you're going to have on day 10, but make the plan, work the plan, and then reevaluate the plan. And then I just want to say, y'all can do it. I mean, you know, debt doesn't have to be crippling. I think a lot of people just think of it, oh, it's this huge thing. No, you can knock it down $1 at a time. Like literally at the end of some months, I would say, oh, I got $20 left. Guess what? I'm about to apply that to my debt. So just $1 at a time, step by step, you knock it down, it's going to happen.
Thank you guys so much. I've tagged them on my Insta story as well as my posts, so please feel free to finish the conversation with all these beautiful panelists in their DMs, ask them questions. Everyone seemed to be really excited about this panel, so tag us on your story. Tell us what you learned from this panel, what this meant to you, something that you're going to apply to your own life and your own journey because of this panel. We'd really love to see that feedback so we can repost. I want to thank my panelists so much, because you guys didn't have to do this, and you took time and you volunteered time out of your own day. Dr. Odunsi's on call right now, and like I really, really appreciate it. So we're super grateful, and I know that this is going to help a lot of students in their journey to financial freedom. And we have a lot of people saying thank you in the comments. So go ahead and tag us on your Insta story. Tell us what this meant to you, and we'll finish the pre-med party tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be having Dr. Josie talk about how to write your personal statement. So be tuned in tomorrow. Thank you guys so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.